Wait, remember Shaman King? No, not the newer version of the series, I'm talking about the OG early 2000s series today. And the early 2000s were truly my realization of the awesome forms of media coming from Japan and brought to the US. From manga to anime, my worldview was expanding thanks to it all, and Shaman King serves as one of the earlier series that I was totally hooked on. It just had this look and style to it that felt so fierce yet relaxed at the same time. A story that is equal parts kick-butt action as it is lighthearted and extremely charming. The property of Shaman King is popular, like really popular, being a highly regarded manga first and foremost, with a fair amount of both love and hate for the original anime that ran into some snags when trying to adapt the franchise. So I want to get into all of that and mainly talk about the original anime adaptation that I experienced, what happened to it when dealing with the manga still being written at the same time, what 4Kids would do with their license of the property, and what the future holds for this beloved series. If you are from the US like me, most anime you consumed at first were through one of two ways, and I mean this to my generation specifically, seeing stuff like Dragon Ball Z through Toonami, or having 4Kids introduce you to many properties that you may have come to love, only to realize that the versions of the anime you witnessed were the chopped and screwed versions some odd years later. But even in knowing that, still have a level of nostalgia held for the corniness of the dubs, thanks to them being the introduction to the properties for you in the first place. Now, let's explore some Shaman King, shall we? When it comes to Shaman King in general, my first introduction to the property was through the monthly Shonen Jump magazine, where I was so fascinated with what I had seen that I had to go out and start reading the series standalone by getting the first volume of the manga. And to my surprise, Shaman King had more beyond the pages of the manga, and had the anime licensed by 4Kids and brought over to be on the FoxBox in September of 2003, right there alongside the mix of shows the Cartoon Block was offering. This is how I experienced the anime first. While it is the 4Kids dub of the show, it's technically the version that is extremely nostalgic to me. The main character we follow in the series is a kid named Yo, allowing him to harness the power of a dead person's spirit and then use that power to fight and battle others. The spirit that he has that translates to the smaller ball-like version and full embodiment is Amidamaru, a long-dead legendary samurai who ends up deciding to work with Yo, as the two form a close bond as we begin to learn about the purpose of the shaman. It ends up being your standard fare of loose explanations of what's going on for a bit, but the baseline premise comes from when Yo ends up having to battle a character named Len, that the all-out battle to be the Shaman King is upon us, and what this ends up being is a tournament that takes place every 500 years, featuring shaman from all around to duke it out for the title of Shaman King. Once crowned Shaman King, they are the sole person who can harness the control over the Great Spirit, being able to mold the world as it stands in whatever way they want. A pretty all-powerful prize for the victor, and a very solid way to bring in all these different types of characters that all have their own reasoning for wanting to become the Shaman King. Now, the legacy of Shaman King is pretty interesting, as this anime adaptation of the manga would start happening before the manga itself was finished, leading to a pretty quick catch up to where the manga was at and having to do what Game of Thrones eventually would do, and that's make the rest of it up without having the source material to follow, making this first version of the anime one that goes a bit in a different direction than how the manga would wrap things up. So let's dig into what the first version of the Shaman King anime had to offer. The original manga was created by Hiroyuki Takai and began its run towards the end of the 1990s, with the first chapter starting in Japan's weekly Shonen Jump in June of 1998, fully running until August of 2004 to complete its story with 32 individual volumes released. Since then, the Shaman King brand would only grow, with this year serving as the 25th anniversary of the series, as fans can look back and celebrate just how expansive it all became. Today, nearly 40 million copies of the manga series in Japan have been sold or are in stores, ranking it up there as one of the best-selling manga in general, all starting from a small beginning that brought an interesting concept to the pages of a comic that eventually turned into a full-on anime series due to its rising popularity only 3 years into its creation. The series wasn't done yet, only being around halfway done when the anime was being created. Now, this isn't something new. We can look at almost any popular manga property, and there is probably an anime series going on at the same time already, but more traditionally when this happens, we'd see several avenues taken in these situations to keep both running when the anime would catch up to where the manga is at. In some cases, we just have long gaps so that the manga can move forward along, and eventually there will be more proper source material to pull from. In other cases, and for sure the most prevalent for the really popular series, filler. Everyone's favorite word to discuss when there would be episodes that are solely created to fill in the gaps of the story, with most times random or less serious segues, as to not mess with the main story, being less consequential with whatever happens there. For Shaman King, however, the anime ran into a different problem, as it would come out in July of 2001 and end its run by September of 2002, producing a total of 64 episodes. Can you see the problem? The anime wrapped up its story a couple years before the story was finished. Because of this, the anime only followed the manga up until a specific point before they had to pivot and create their own plot points and eventual ending. So really, towards the end of the anime, it's all filler, but just not traditional filler. This I'll talk about more later on, but with the anime series done and the manga still running, what do we do with this now finished anime? Simple. It's time to bring it to international markets. With the manga, Viz Media was already on top of bringing the series to North America by having chapters serialized in the new English monthly Shonen Jump, and eventually manga volumes to follow. The anime would also be licensed at the same time to 4Kids, being localized for release on the FoxBox later the same year. Now let's get the obvious out of the way. The 4Kids localization of anything they get a license for is always going to come with a slew of changes thanks to censorship. Now, compared to other shows, Shaman King didn't face the worst of it, but the biggest things were violence getting toned down and removing anything that would tie into religion, like crosses seen on gravestones would be removed. Suggestive or inappropriate for US audience bits were snipped and altered as well. So in the grand scheme of what 4Kids has done before, this isn't so bad, but the main thing you will notice, however, is the dub itself delivering that oh so nostalgically cringy writing which 4Kids was known for when they were replacing dialogue said by the characters. Oh, and some names were changed as well, so if you hear me mention a character's name that isn't what they are named originally, blame 4Kids. But this is the version I grew up with. I have this attachment to it for some reason, don't judge me. But let me tell you, Shaman King starts off so much fun. Yo merges with Amidamaru at the beginning of the series when Yo ends up fighting Ryu in the cemetery to protect his new buddy Morty, but Yo doesn't just get Amidamaru as his partner spirit after this moment. In fact, Amidamaru declines becoming Yo's partner, but Yo is determined on them coming together. Despite Morty pushing Yo away from this, Yo truly sees no evil in this spirit, leading him to eventually find this ancient sword when visiting a museum, as they then come across another spirit, Masoke, who was weeping, explaining his backstory to them about creating that sword and how he was great friends with Amidamaru in their original lives 600 years ago, but their bond comes from Amidamaru sparing his friend's life when ordered to kill Masake, so no other special swords like the one he had crafted could be made, causing him to take the sword with him and return one day and give it to Amidamaru as the best sword it can be. But this was overheard, and Amidamaru was attacked for disobeying his orders in favor of sparing his friend's life, as now he would have to fight off attacks as much as he could, but eventually, without his perfectly crafted sword, he would not live long past this, causing Masoke to be left with a sense of guilt and spend his afterlife crying over both his slain friend and what his perfectly crafted sword had now become, rusting away in a museum, never being able to fulfill his promise. Yo then works with Masoke to restore the sword to its full greatness in exchange for helping him fulfill his promise to his friend. In doing so, he leaves this plane of existence. Amidamaru is then gifted the sword by Yo, but still doesn't join him quite yet, with him ready to leave this world as well, until Yo has another encounter with Ryu again and decides to join in once more in helping him, there solidifying his decision to work with Yo, and the sword is then returned, now in its full glory, back to the museum, and our journey following Yo and Amidamaru begins. One thing I love about Shaman King is the wide variety of cool characters, and by that I particularly mean the manga, as the show has its fair bit of issues with characters later on, as they introduce more of them. Yo is obviously pretty cool. He just has this laxed vibe about him, but that doesn't overshadow the moments where he shows great excitement or is more expressive in certain situations. He's got some cool headphones and he doesn't like wearing an undershirt, so he's easy to root for during his battles. His new buddy Morty is your average everyday school student who ends up being able to see spirits, but is not trained in the shaman ways, and basically by accident becomes part of the story as our way to get introduced to Yo, and see firsthand what is going on. He's smaller than the others his age and he easily gets picked on for it, but his friendship with Yo is pretty great as it develops, and Morty's more scared and over-the-top reactions to seeing and being around these dead spirits starts to calm, and he learns to find the confidence in himself through this friendship. He also eventually becomes a shaman as well, because of course. Another main character quickly joins the cast, and that's Anna, who right away introduces herself as Yo's wife, and we see just how frightened Yo is of her as she is there to train him hard to be ready for future shaman fights, with the tournament coming up. She's a pretty interesting and headstrong character that deeply cares for Yo, wanting to be with him since he was the first friend she had ever made, and wants to help make Yo the Shaman King, which will in turn make her the Shaman Queen. Her way of showing love is definitely more aggressive than anything, but she truly does care for and believe in Yo. Maybe a little too overprotective, but as a character in general, I think she's great. From there, we constantly get to meet some incredibly cool and varied characters who all bring new personalities into the mix, thanks to where they're from and what they can do as different shaman, all having their own reasonings for doing what they do or wanting to become Shaman King, giving each of them a sense of purpose to be here in the story, again, earlier on, as opposed to the stuff that happens towards the end. And yes, Len's older sister did have me feeling a type of way growing up, but that's none of your business. And just to name a couple of my favorites here, a character that defined what being rad is was Trey, the snowboarder who has a big ol' heart of gold but can be pretty serious and tough when the challenge arises. I also really dig Ryu's story arc within the show, and he's not just the typical punk that we meet at the start of the series, but rather a person who finally lets out his emotions to show that he truly does care about something more in this world than just his ridiculous pompadour. But it is fabulous. And that's really only scratching the surface here with the characters in the show, as this quickly goes from a small group of people to a large roster of different and unique shaman. The anime towards the later parts, since it was mostly put together with no source material ready yet, sparingly gives us much more on other cool characters, making them feel a lot more background-like compared to the more fleshed out versions of them in the manga, offering a rush to the finish-like feeling, being an easy way to describe it. The main villain of the show, the ultimate shaman for Yo to face, is his brother Zeke, as they try and hide that fact for a bit in the series, even though they look pretty much alike, and also he's kind of like his ancestor. It's a whole weird thing. He's died a couple times, he's been reincarnated, he gets more powerful each time, and now he looks like Yo. And Zeke is shown as this unrelenting, immortal, powerful force, claiming Yo to be the other piece of his puzzle, as at one point the tournament doesn't matter anymore, with Zeke trying to reach the Great Spirit and Yo trying to stop him from doing so. Obviously, going up against this type of power with no plan results in Yo having no real way to combat his powers. So Zeke then just rips the soul out of Yo and consumes it, beginning to combine their souls together, explaining the whole other piece of the puzzle thing, as Yo loses everything that makes him him, losing his memories while he drifts away in this void. But when all the other shaman confront Zeke and try and stop him, they cry out that thanks to Yo, they are all stronger. He's not gone forever because Yo is always there in their hearts, as they all get ready for their last stand to stop Zeke, which, it's not going so well for them. But you know how this all goes, the big speech, the inspirational vibes, it all ends up helping Yo somehow break through the power of Zeke to get back to his normal self, as Zeke then just says screw it and goes right for the Great Spirit regardless. And now what are our heroes to do? He's becoming a literal god. Well, thanks to the energy from the others, Yo is able to reach a different level of power with Amidamaru, as they become one giant entity that cuts Zeke and his giant spirit of fire in half after proclaiming that this is what it feels like to be the Shaman King. And that's the anime. I feel like you could really tell that the whole ending here was more just a put together way to wrap things up. This definitely led to a lot of fans not being so fulfilled with where the anime took liberties here, and don't consider it the ending of the series, and technically it's not. The ending of Shaman King is one of confusion depending on where you jumped in or out at within the series. The manga ended at volume 32, but this wasn't the actual ending that was fully envisioned. The series would get reprinted as a complete edition, essentially, bringing the total number of volumes to 35, with this being the definitive version the direction of the series was fully meant to head in. The original anime reached a point that got about halfway through where the original manga was at before completely filling in the rest of the story to wrap up the series. But now there is a new version of the anime that gives Shaman King a second chance in animation form to tell the story a lot closer to the source material, and would total 52 episodes between 2021 and 2022. And it's also greenlit for a sequel series to continue on from there. So if you are a fan of Shaman King and you are watching the new version of the anime, there is still more to come. So whether you like how the new anime handled rebooting the series to be closer to the manga or not, it's just nice to see that Shaman King has gotten another resurgence for a chance to do so. Over the years since the original manga and anime ended, several spin-off manga had come out to build up Shaman King even further, like Shaman King Zero, Shaman King Flowers, Shaman King Red Crimson, Shaman King Superstar, Shaman King Marcos, Shaman King and a Garden, and Shaman King Faust 8, which all have varying amounts of volumes for their respective series. 4Kids used the licensing to try and make the brand bigger in the US. The early 2000s were crowded with every property trying to reach massive heights and labeled a franchise, and Shaman King was no different, so they turned to Konami to help make a series of video games with one main console release on the PS2 and 4 Game Boy Advance games, all within the span of a year. 2004 and 2005 became crowded with Shaman King games, and even 2 of them on the Game Boy Advance tried pulling a Pokemon with them, releasing on the same day, and with one version called Soaring Hawk and the other called Sprinting Wolf, where you collect spirits and fight with them. I more remember playing Master of Spirits 1 and 2, but regardless, they pumped them out and they did so extremely fast. Another thing that all these properties attempted was a card game, where here, Tomy was the one in charge of making the card game in Japan with Upper Deck's help in bringing it over to the US, which has for some reason led me to having this sealed booster box of cards. What am I supposed to do with this? The TCG didn't last long, as Upper Deck blamed the lack of success with the anime with how the cards performed sales-wise. Regardless, Shaman King in recent times has found a new way to prevail with new printings and audio versions of the manga being released, the original anime getting the English and Japanese versions put out on Blu-ray thanks to Discotech, and most notable, a brand new version of the anime in general. Shaman King for me was best enjoyed growing up with the manga, getting the story the creator wanted to tell fully realized that way, before it would then be fully realized in the new complete versions. But in regards to the anime that we did get, I still enjoyed a good bit of it for what it was. Yeah, the dub is what it is, but it was how I was brought up on it animation-wise. But I will say, when I was in Japan, I did pick up this Blu-ray set of the new series, and I'm excited to see how it adapts the manga in a more direct way with all of the source material for the story out there before it was created. Revisiting the original anime, I can see all the reasons why it only fueled my enjoyment of the Shaman King property, but there truly is a lot that holds it back from being great, because it's definitely not for the concepts. I think the ideas and focusing on the shaman was just a really cool concept for a series in general. But to me, what held it back is partly thanks to the 4Kids dubbing, and partly thanks to where the show takes us in the end compared to the source material. The series ends up feeling like a rushed mess as it heads towards the finale. A bad ending or an unsatisfying ending can sour the whole journey taken to get there, and sadly, the first anime suffers from an ending that feels like a cop-out moment that we shouldn't have reached yet, or in the matter, not go in this direction at all. It's hard for me to recommend the original show regardless if the new anime does a better job at capturing the story of Shaman King or not, but if you grew up on these licensed anime dropping on the FoxBox, then there is some fun to be found upon a revisit. There's also plenty of charm locked away in these 64 episodes that bring you right back to those Saturday mornings, and a feeling like that is always worth the stroll down memory lane. But it's not to say that it was for the show being a masterpiece, it's far from it, and ends on a less than stellar representation of where the story actually ends up going in other places. I would love to know if and how you were first introduced to Shaman King. Was it the manga, the video games, or the anime, or wade later down the line with some other stuff that came out for the Shaman King property? And also tell me your thoughts on the original anime in general if you ever checked it out. I've been Jordan Fringe, thanks so much for watching, like and subscribe, later.